The sound of textbooks hitting the cafeteria floor echoed through Lincoln High School like a gunshot. Maya Richardson watched her chemistry notes scatter across the grimy tiles, her sandwich crushed under Brandon Mitchell's size 12 sneaker. Around her, laughter erupted from the popular table, the same cruel soundtrack that had followed her through 3 years of high school hell. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. But what those bullies didn't know was that Maya's father had a very different way of dealing with people who disrespected his family. And tomorrow, everything will change. Maya Richardson had perfected the art of invisibility. At 17, she moved through the halls of Lincoln High School in Chicago like a ghost, her oversized hoodie pulled low, earbuds creating a barrier between herself and the world that seemed determined to crush her spirit. Her dark eyes, intelligent and observant, missed nothing. But she had learned long ago that seeing everything and saying nothing was the key to survival. The morning started like every other. Maya slipped into her first period AP chemistry class and took her usual seat in the back corner, away from the clusters of students who had formed their social hierarchies years ago. She was one of only 3 black students in the advanced class, and the only one who didn't come from Riverside Prep, the elite private school that fed into Lincoln's gifted program. "All right, settle down," Mrs. Peterson called out, her grey hair pulled into its usual tight bun. "Today, we're assigning lab partners for the semester project. This will count for 30% of your grade, so choose wisely." Maya's stomach dropped. Group assignments were her personal nightmare, a guaranteed ticket to doing all the work while her partner took half the credit, if she was lucky. More often, it meant being the last person picked, standing alone while everyone else paired. Off with friends. She kept her eyes fixed on her notebook, sketching chemical bonds in the margins, hoping to become even more invisible than usual. Around her, chairs scraped against linoleum as students gravitated toward their chosen partners. Maya. She looked up to find Ethan Walsh standing beside her desk. Ethan was everything Maya wasn't. Popular, wealthy, destined for Harvard-like. His older brother. His blonde hair was perfectly tousled, his polo shirt crisp and expensive. Maya had never spoken to him directly, though she'd certainly noticed him. Everyone noticed Ethan Walsh. "Want to partner up?" he asked, his smile genuine rather than mocking. Maya blinked, certain she'd misheard. "What?" "For the lab project. You're obviously the smartest person in here. I'd be crazy not to ask." Behind him, Maya caught sight of Jessica Chen and Brianna Torres exchanging shocked glances. Jessica had been angling for Ethan's attention since freshman year, and Brianna was part of the inner circle of girls who ruled the school's social scene. Their expressions ranged from confusion to outright hostility. Sure," Maya managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Great." Ethan pulled out the chair next to her and sat down, pulling out his phone to exchange numbers. "We should probably meet at the library after school to plan our approach." Maya nodded, still in shock. She couldn't remember the last time someone had voluntarily chosen to work with her, let alone someone like Ethan. As Mrs. Peterson began explaining the project requirements, a comprehensive analysis of organic compound reactions, Maya found herself stealing glances at her new lab partner. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of classes, where Maya resumed her usual role as the invisible girl. She navigated the crowded hallways with practiced efficiency, keeping her head down and her movements quick. By lunchtime, she had almost convinced herself that the chemistry class interaction had been a dream. The cafeteria at Lincoln High was a carefully orchestrated social ecosystem. The athletes claimed the tables near the windows, their letterman, jackets like uniforms, marking their territory. The theatre kids gathered around the tables closest to the stage, where they'd eventually perform their spring musical. The academic elite, Honor Society members and AP students occupied the center tables, their conversations revolving around college applications and SAT scores. And then there were the outliers like Maya, who ate alone at the small tables. Along the far wall, grateful for the anonymity that came with being overlooked, Maya had just unwrapped her peanut butter and jelly sandwich when she heard her name being called. She turned to see Ethan approaching her table, his lunch tray balanced. In one hand, "Mind if I sit?" he asked. Maya glanced around the cafeteria, wondering if this was some sort of elaborate joke. Several students were already staring, their expressions ranging from curious to hostile. At the popular table, Brandon Mitchell, star quarterback and Maya's primary tormentor, was watching with obvious displeasure. "You don't have to sit here," Maya said quietly. "Your friends are probably wondering where you are." Ethan shrugged and sat down anyway. "Maybe I'm exactly where I want to be." For the next 20 minutes, they talked about the chemistry project. Ethan asking thoughtful questions about her ideas for their research approach. Maya found herself relaxing despite the continued stares from around the cafeteria. Ethan was actually listening to her, treating her opinions as valuable rather than dismissing them outright. "You're really passionate about this stuff," Ethan observed as Maya outlined her thoughts on molecular bonding patterns. "Science doesn't lie," Maya replied. "It doesn't care about your background or what clothes you wear or who your parents are. The periodic table is the same for everyone." Something flickered across Ethan's face. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. That's a pretty wise way to look at it. Their conversation was interrupted by the sharp scrape of a chair being pulled back. Brandon Mitchell loomed over their table, his broad shoulders blocking out the fluorescent lights above. Behind him stood his usual crew, Tyler Jenkins, Marcus Thompson and David Park, like a pack of wolves surrounding their prey. "Well, well," Brandon drawled, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet section of the cafeteria. "Look what we have here. Walsh slumming it with the scholarship kids." Maya's jaw tightened, but she kept her eyes fixed on her sandwich. This was familiar territory. The best strategy was to wait it out, let them say their piece, and hope they'd get bored and move on. "Come on, man," Ethan said, his voice steady but firm. "We're just eating lunch." "Just eating lunch," Brandon repeated mockingly. He reached over and flicked Maya's water bottle, sending it rolling across the table. "You know, Richardson, I'm curious about something. How exactly does someone like you afford to go to a school like this?" Maya's hands clenched in her lap, but she remained silent. Around them, conversations had stopped entirely. Even the lunch staff had paused in their serving to watch the drama unfold. "I mean, we all know your mom works at the diner on 5th Street. Brandon continued, enjoying his audience. "And I don't see your dad around much. So how exactly are you paying for those fancy AP classes?" The mention of her father sent a chill down Maya's spine, but not for the reasons Brandon might have expected. Antonio Richardson was very much present in her life, just not in any way that would make sense to someone like Brandon Mitchell. "Leave her alone, Brandon," Ethan said, standing up from his chair. At 6'2", he was almost eye level with the quarterback. "Aw, how sweet," Tyler Jenkins chimed in. "Rich boy's got himself a charity case." "You know what I think?" Marcus Thompson added, leaning closer to Maya's table. "I think maybe she's got some kind of side hustle going on. Maybe dealing with a little something to help pay the bills." Maya's head snapped up, her dark eyes flashing with anger. "What did you just say?" The cafeteria had gone completely silent now. Even the background noise of the kitchen had stopped. Everyone was watching, waiting to see how the quiet girl would respond to being accused of drug dealing. "You heard me?" Marcus said, emboldened by Maya's reaction. "Maybe that's how you really afford all this. Maybe that's why you're always so paranoid, always looking over your shoulder." "Marcus, shut up," Ethan warned, but Brandon held up a hand. No, let him talk. This is interesting." Brandon's eyes glittered with malicious excitement. You know, now that I think about it, Richardson does have that sketchy vibe. Always sneaking around, never talks to anyone. Classic dealer behavior. Maya slowly stood up from her chair. Her movements deliberate and controlled. She was several inches shorter than any of the boys surrounding her table, but something in her posture had changed. The hunched shoulders and downcast eyes were gone, replaced by a stillness that seemed almost dangerous. "You want to be very careful about what you say next," Maya said, her voice quiet, but carrying clearly across the silent cafeteria. Brandon laughed, but there was something nervous in the sound. "Oh, what? You're going to threaten me? What are you going to do? Call your dealer friends?" Maya tilted her head slightly, studying Brandon with the same intensity she usually reserved for chemical equations. "I don't need to call anyone. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Even Brandon's crew exchanged uncertain glances, suddenly unsure of the dynamic they had created. But Brandon was too committed to back down now, especially with half the school watching. He reached over and swept Maya's lunch tray off the table, sending her sandwich and apple crashing to the floor. "Pick it up," he commanded. Maya looked down at her scattered lunch, then back up at Brandon. When she spoke, her voice was so quiet that people in the back had to strain to hear her. "You have no idea who you're talking to." The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Brandon's face had gone slightly pale, though he tried to maintain his cocky grin. Something about Maya's tone, the way she held herself, had shifted. The entire atmosphere in the cafeteria. Even the lunch ladies had stopped pretending to work and were openly staring. "What's that supposed to mean?" Brandon asked, but his voice had lost some of its earlier bravado. Maya bent down slowly, deliberately, and picked up her apple. She examined it for bruises, then took a bite, chewing thoughtfully while maintaining eye contact with Brandon. The casual nature of her movements somehow made the moment even more unsettling. "It means," Maya said after swallowing, "that you should probably walk away now." Tyler Jenkins let out a forced laugh. "Oh, we're supposed to be scared of the quiet girl? What are you going to do, study us to death?" Maya's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Tyler Jenkins lives at 847 Maple Drive with his grandmother, Mrs. Eleanor Jenkins. Takes the number 42 bus home every day because his license got suspended for reckless driving. Grandmother works double shifts at St. Mary's Hospital to keep him in school here, instead of the public school in his district." Tyler's face went white. "How do you—" "Marcus Thompson," Maya continued, her voice still eerily calm. "Parents are getting divorced. Dad moved out last month after the gambling debts got too high. Mom's been taking anxiety medication and sleeping pills, which Marcus has been stealing and selling to kids at Riverside Prep for $50 a bottle." Marcus took an involuntary step backward. "You're lying." David Park. Honor roll student. Valedictorian track. Early admission to Northwestern already secured. Also been cheating on standardized tests using a sophisticated system involving bathroom breaks and pre-programmed calculator messages. SAT scores that got him that early admission? Not exactly authentic. The color drained from David's face. His carefully constructed future suddenly felt very fragile. Brandon looked around at his crew, watching his friends' confidence crumble one by one. How could you possibly know any of that? Maya took another bite of her apple, considering her words carefully. Around them, phones had started appearing as students began recording what was clearly becoming the most dramatic cafeteria confrontation in Lincoln High history. "Information is power," Maya said simply. "And power is something you clearly don't understand." "You're bluffing," Brandon said, but his voice lacked conviction. Maya reached into her backpack and pulled out her phone. She scrolled through it casually, then held it up so Brandon could see the screen. His eyes widened as he read whatever was displayed there. Brandon Mitchell, Maya read aloud. Star quarterback, but grades are slipping fast. Been using Adderall. That isn't prescribed to him to stay focused during games and tests. Got it from his cousin Jake, who's been dealing prescription drugs out of his apartment on the south side. Brandon's been meeting Jake every Thursday after practice at the abandoned warehouse on Industrial Boulevard. Brandon's face had gone completely white now. That's impossible. Nobody knows about that. Your truck, Maya continued. 2018 red Silverado, license plate BM 2025. You think nobody notices when you drive to the same location every week? You think nobody cares that the star quarterback might be using performance-enhancing drugs? The cafeteria had erupted in whispers now. Students were frantically texting, sharing what they were witnessing. This was the kind of drama that would dominate social media for weeks. Ethan, who had been watching the entire exchange with growing amazement, finally found his voice. Maya, how do you know all this? Maya glanced at him, and for just a moment, her expression softened. Some people collect stamps. I collect information. You're some kind of freak, Brandon sputtered, but the insult fell flat. He was clearly rattled, looking around for support that was no longer there. His crew had slowly backed away, each of them wondering what Maya might know about their own secrets. Maybe, Maya agreed. But I'm a freak who knows exactly who you are, all of you. Your schedules, your habits, your weaknesses, your fears. I know who you really are when you think nobody's watching. She stood up fully now, and despite being the smallest person in the confrontation, she somehow commanded the entire space. Brandon, you want to know how someone like me affords to go to school here? The truth is, my family doesn't just pay tuition. We could buy this entire school without thinking twice about it. Your mom works at a diner, Tyler said weakly. My mother owns 7 restaurants across Chicago, Maya corrected. The diner on 5th Street is just one of them. She works there because she likes to stay connected to where she came from, but that's just the legitimate businesses. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Students leaned forward, straining to hear what Maya would say next. You see, my father has a very particular view about respect, Maya continued. He believes that respect is earned, but more importantly, he believes that disrespect should have consequences. Real consequences. Brandon's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. What are you saying? I'm saying that you just humiliated his daughter in front of half the school. You accused her of being a drug dealer. You made her food hit the floor and demanded she pick it up like some kind of servant. Maya's voice never rose above conversational level, but every word seemed to carry weight. My father is going to be very interested to hear about this conversation. Your father? Marcus asked, his voice barely a whisper. Maya smiled then, and it was genuinely warm, which somehow made it more terrifying than any scowl would have been. Antonio Richardson. Some people know him by other names, but I just call him Dad. The name didn't immediately register with most of the students, but Ethan's face went pale. Being from a wealthy family meant being aware of Chicago's power structures, both legitimate and otherwise. Antonio Richardson wasn't exactly a household name, but in certain circles he was very well known indeed. You're lying, Brandon said, but he was clearly trying to convince himself as much as anyone else. Maya pulled out her phone again and hit a speed dial number. She put it on speaker, and after 2 rings, a deep male voice answered. Princess? Everything okay? You don't usually call during school hours. Hi, Daddy, Maya said, her voice suddenly younger, more vulnerable. I'm fine, but I wanted to tell you about something that happened today. What happened? The voice on the other end had shifted, becoming sharper, more alert. Some boys at school were being mean to me. They said I was a drug dealer and made me drop my lunch on the floor. The silence on the other end of the phone was deafening. When Antonio Richardson finally spoke, his voice was deadly quiet. "What are their names, baby girl?" Maya looked directly at Brandon as she answered. "Brandon Mitchell, Tyler Jenkins, Marcus Thompson, and David Park." "I see." There was a pause, and in the background other voices could be heard, men talking in low, urgent tones. "Princess, are you somewhere safe right now?" "I'm in the cafeteria. There are lots of people around." "Good. Stay exactly where you are. Uncle Vincent is going to come pick you up in a few minutes, okay? We're going to have a family dinner tonight and talk about this properly." Maya's smile widened. "Okay, Daddy. I love you." "I love you too, baby girl." "And Maya?" "Yes? Don't worry about those boys anymore. Daddy's going to take care of everything." The line went dead. Maya tucked her phone back into her pocket and looked around at the four boys who had so confidently confronted her just minutes earlier. They were all staring at her with expressions ranging from terror to disbelief. "Uncle Vincent drives a black Escalade," Maya said conversationally. "He should be here in about 10 minutes. He's very protective of family." Brandon opened his mouth, then closed it again. For the first time in his high school career, he was completely speechless. Around them, the cafeteria had erupted into chaos. Students were frantically Googling Antonio Richardson's name, sharing screenshots, recording videos. The name was starting to connect for more people now. Whispered stories of a man who controlled significant portions of Chicago's underground economy, who commanded respect through methods that were never quite proven, but always effective. "Maya," Ethan said quietly, "is this real?" She turned to look at him, and her expression was almost apologetic. "I tried to be normal, I really did. I just wanted to get through high school without anyone knowing who I really was. But sometimes—" She glanced back at Brandon and his crew. "Sometimes people don't give you a choice." The sound of expensive engines could be heard pulling into the school parking lot. Through the cafeteria windows, students could see a convoy of black SUVs parking in front of the building. Men in dark suits were getting out, their movements precise and purposeful. Maya gathered her remaining lunch items and slung her backpack over her shoulder. "I should probably go meet Uncle Vincent. He gets worried when I'm not where I'm supposed to be." She paused at the edge of their table and looked back at the four boys who had started this entire confrontation. "Gentlemen," she said politely, "it's been an education." The black Escalade idled in the school parking lot like a predator waiting to strike. Through the tinted windows, Maya could see the outline of Vincent Marcelli, her father's right-hand man, and the closest thing she had to an uncle. Students pressed against the cafeteria windows, phones recording everything as Maya walked calmly through the hallways toward the main entrance. Principal Henderson intercepted her halfway there, his usually composed face flushed with panic. "Ms. Richardson, I need you to come to my office immediately. We need to discuss what just happened in the cafeteria." Maya paused, studying the middle-aged administrator who suddenly looked very small and very nervous. "Mr. Henderson, with all due respect, my uncle is waiting for me. My father is expecting me home." "Your father?" Henderson said, lowering his voice. "Maya, I need to understand what's going on here. I've been getting calls from the district office, from people who know my family." Maya finished. "Mr. Henderson, you've been the principal here for 8 years. In that time, have I ever caused any trouble? Have I ever been sent to your office for disciplinary reasons? Have I ever been anything other than a model student?" Henderson's shoulders sagged slightly. "No, you haven't. You've been exemplary." "Then trust me when I say that what happened today wasn't my fault. I tried very hard to avoid this situation. But some people don't understand respect until it's explained to them in terms they can comprehend." Through the glass doors of the main entrance, Vincent Marcelli had gotten out of the Escalade. He was a mountain of a man, easily 6'5", with silver hair and a suit that probably cost more than most teachers' monthly salaries. He checked his watch with the precision of someone whose time was extremely valuable. "I have to go," Maya said simply. "But Mr. Henderson, you might want to have a conversation with Brandon Mitchell and his friends about their behavior before someone else does." The warning was delivered so gently that it took Henderson a moment to recognize it as such. By the time he did, Maya was already pushing through the main doors. "Uncle Vincent," Maya called out, and the transformation was immediate. The composed, slightly dangerous young woman from the cafeteria became a teenager, running to embrace a beloved family member. Vincent's stern expression melted as he wrapped Maya in a bear hug that lifted her feet off the ground. "There's my girl. You okay, sweetheart?" "I'm fine now," Maya said, breathing in the familiar scent of his expensive cologne mixed with cigarettes he wasn't supposed to smoke anymore. Vincent held her at arm's length, his experienced eyes scanning her face for any signs of distress. "Your father is very upset. He's called an emergency family meeting." Maya nodded, understanding the gravity of that statement. Emergency family meetings were rare in the Richardson household, reserved for situations that threatened the family's safety or honor. "How many people?" "Everyone," Vincent said grimly. "Your cousins are flying in from New York. Your Uncle Marco is driving up from Springfield. Even your Aunt Isabella is coming, and you know how she feels about leaving Miami during the season." They walked toward the Escalade together, Maya's small frame dwarfed by Vincent's imposing presence. Behind them, students continued to watch from every available window, their phones capturing what would undoubtedly become the most talked-about moment. "In Lincoln High history," "Uncle Vincent," Maya said as he opened the passenger door for her, "I didn't want this to happen. I really tried to stay under the radar." Vincent's expression softened. "I know you did, sweetheart, but sometimes the world doesn't let us choose who we are. Sometimes it forces our hand." As they pulled away from the school, Maya caught a glimpse of Brandon Mitchell standing in the doorway of the main building, his face pale as he watched the convoy of expensive vehicles disappear down the street. She almost felt sorry for him. Almost. The drive to the Richardson family compound took them through 3 distinct neighborhoods, each transition marking a shift in Chicago's social and economic landscape. They left the middle-class suburban area where Lincoln High was located, passed through the gentrified downtown district where young professionals lived in converted lofts, and finally entered the exclusive enclave of Riverside Heights, where old money and new power coexisted behind high walls and sophisticated security systems. The Richardson estate sat on 5 acres of meticulously maintained grounds, surrounded by a stone wall that looked decorative but concealed state-of-the-art security technology. The house itself was a masterpiece of modern architecture disguised as a traditional Georgian mansion, all clean lines and elegant proportions, with enough windows to seem welcoming and enough privacy to conduct business that required discretion. As they pulled through the gates, Maya could see that the circular driveway was already crowded with expensive vehicles. Her cousin Tony's Ferrari sat next to Uncle Marco's Mercedes, while Aunt Isabella's white Bentley gleamed under the afternoon sun. This was indeed a full family gathering. Vincent walked Maya to the front door, where Rosa Delacroix, the family's longtime housekeeper, and the woman who had helped raise Maya, waited with a worried expression. "Her," Rosa said, pulling Maya into a warm embrace. "Your father has been pacing like a caged animal. What happened at that school?" "Just some boys who forgot their manners," Maya said, kissing Rosa's cheek. "Is Dad in his office?" "The library," Rosa said. "Everyone's waiting for you." Maya took a deep breath and walked through the familiar halls of her childhood home. The house was decorated with an eclectic mix of art and artifacts. her mother's influence showing in the African sculptures and vibrant paintings, while her father's heritage was represented in the classical Italian pieces and family photographs. Dating back generations, the library was Antonio Richardson's favorite room, lined floor to ceiling with books on everything from military strategy to Renaissance art. It was where he conducted the family's most important business, where decisions were made that affected not just their immediate circle, but networks of associates across multiple states. Maya paused at the heavy oak doors, hearing the low murmur of voices inside. She knocked twice, their family code, and heard her father's voice call out for her to enter. The scene that greeted her was both familiar and intimidating. Antonio Richardson stood behind his massive desk, his presence commanding even in a room full of powerful people. At 52, he was still an imposing figure, tall, broad-shouldered, with graying temples that only added to his authority. His dark eyes, so similar to Maya's own, were currently blazing with protective fury. Around the room, Maya's extended family had gathered. Her cousin Tony Marcelli, Vincent's son and heir apparent to certain family operations, stood by the window, with his arms crossed. Uncle Marco Richardson, her father's younger brother and the family's financial strategist, sat in one of the leather armchairs with a tablet full of information. Aunt Isabella Rossetti, her father's sister and the most feared negotiator in the family, had claimed the chair closest to the desk, her designer suit and perfectly manicured nails concealing a mind that could dismantle a person's life with a few well-placed phone calls. "There she is," Antonio said, his voice warm despite the tension in the room. He came around the desk and enveloped Maya in a hug that made her feel safe for the first time all day. "My brave girl." "Hi, Dad," Maya said, breathing in his familiar scent of expensive aftershave and the faint smokiness that always lingered on his clothes. "I'm sorry about today." Antonio held her at arm's length, his hands on her shoulders. "You have nothing to apologize for. You were protecting yourself and maintaining the family honor. I'm proud of you." "Tell us exactly what happened, Uncle," Marco said, his voice gentle but businesslike. "Start from the beginning." Maya settled into her usual chair, a smaller version of the leather armchairs that had been custom-made for her when she turned 16, and recounted the day's events. She spoke clearly and methodically, providing details about not just what was said, but the dynamics she had observed, the social hierarchies at play, and her assessment of each person's motivations. The room grew quieter as she spoke, the adults exchanging glances that conveyed entire conversations. When she finished, the silence stretched for several long moments. "4 boys," Aunt Isabella said finally, her voice deceptively calm. She was the only person in the family who could make a simple statement sound like a death sentence. 4 boys thought they could humiliate a Richardson daughter and walk away. "The Mitchell boy," Uncle Marco said, consulting his tablet. "His father owns 3 car dealerships, financially overextended, behind on payments to several suppliers. The family has been living beyond their means for years." "Jenkins," Tony added, "the grandmother working double shifts at St. Mary's, good woman by all accounts. Been struggling since her son, the boy's father, died in Iraq." Antonio nodded slowly. "And the other 2? "Thompson's family is imploding," Vincent reported. "Gambling debts, divorce proceedings, the mother's prescription drug problem that Maya mentioned. The boy was probably acting out because his whole world is falling apart." "Park," Aunt Isabella said, her voice taking on a thoughtful tone. "Early, admission to Northwestern, full-ride scholarship, everything to lose." Maya watched her family dissect the lives of her tormentors with the same precision they applied to any business problem. It was both fascinating and slightly terrifying to see how quickly they could gather comprehensive intelligence on 4 teenage boys. "The question," Antonio said, settling back behind his desk, "is proportional response. These boys crossed a line, but they're children. Stupid, cruel children, but children nonetheless. Children who called our princess a drug dealer in front of half her school, Tony said, his voice hard. Children who tried to humiliate her and make her crawl on the floor like a servant. I understand the offense, Antonio said, his voice carrying the authority that had built an empire. But we are not monsters. We don't destroy children for being children, even stupid ones. Maya felt a surge of love for her father. This was why she respected him, why the family commanded such loyalty. Power without wisdom was just brutality, and Antonio Richardson had always understood the difference. However, Antonio continued, and Maya heard the shift in his tone that meant business was about to be conducted. There must be consequences. There must be understanding. These boys need to learn that actions have repercussions, and more importantly, they need to understand exactly who they attempted to humiliate. What do you want to do? Uncle Marco asked. Antonio leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled as he considered the options. Maya had seen this expression countless times. Her father weighing variables, calculating outcomes, planning moves that would unfold over days or weeks. Education, he said finally. We're going to educate these boys about respect, about consequences, and about the Richardson family. But we're going to do it in a way that teaches rather than destroys. Aunt Isabella raised an eyebrow. And how exactly do you propose we educate 4 teenage bullies? Antonio smiled, and Maya recognized the expression. It was the same smile he wore when he was about to make a move that would surprise everyone, including his own family. We're going to give them exactly what they think they want, he said. We're going to show them what it really means to have power. The next morning arrived with an unusual stillness at Lincoln High School. Word had spread overnight through social media, text messages, and whispered phone calls. Maya Richardson wasn't just the quiet girl in the back of the class. She was connected to something much bigger, much more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Brandon Mitchell sat in his truck in the school parking lot, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles had gone white. He'd barely slept, alternating between convincing himself that yesterday had been some elaborate hoax and researching Antonio Richardson online until 3 in the morning. What he'd found had made his blood run cold. Articles about alleged connections to various business ventures, photographs from charity galas where Richardson stood next to politicians and business leaders, mentions in financial newspapers about his legitimate enterprises, restaurants, construction companies, import-export businesses. And then there were the other articles, the ones that spoke in careful language about rumored associations and unconfirmed reports. Tyler Jenkins hadn't come to school at all. His grandmother had called in sick for him after he'd spent the night vomiting from anxiety. Marcus Thompson had shown up, but looked like he hadn't slept in days, his usual cocky demeanor replaced by nervous glances over his shoulder. David Park sat in his car 3 spaces away from Brandon, staring at his phone with the expression of someone watching his future crumble in real time. But it was the arrival of the Blacktown car at exactly 7:45 a.m. that sent a ripple of awareness through the student body. Maya emerged from the back seat, her usual oversized hoodie replaced by a fitted black blazer over dark jeans, her hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. She looked older somehow, more confident, like she'd finally stopped hiding who she really was. The man who got out of the driver's side was not Vincent Marcelli, but someone none of the students recognized, tall, lean, with the kind of quiet alertness that suggested military or security training. He walked Maya to the front entrance of the school, scanning the area with professional thoroughness before nodding to her and returning to the car. Inside Lincoln High, the atmosphere was electric with tension and curiosity. Students whispered, in clusters, their conversations dying abruptly whenever Maya walked past. Teachers looked at her with new eyes, some fearful, others merely curious about the quiet student who had apparently been hiding such an extraordinary secret. Maya's first period AP chemistry class was packed beyond capacity. Students who weren't even enrolled in the course had found excuses to be there, wanting to witness whatever might happen next. Mrs. Peterson tried to maintain normalcy, but even she kept glancing at Maya with obvious nervousness. Ethan Walsh was already at their lab table when Maya arrived, his expression unreadable. He'd spent his own sleepless night processing what he'd learned, trying to reconcile the girl he'd been getting to know with the revelation of her family connections. "How are you doing?" he asked quietly as Maya settled into her seat. "I'm fine," Maya replied, pulling out her chemistry textbook. "Ready to work on our project?" It was such a normal response that Ethan almost laughed. Here they were, sitting in the aftermath of what amounted to a social earthquake, and Maya was asking about their chemistry assignment. "Maya," Ethan said, lowering his voice, "we need to talk about yesterday." "What about it?" Maya asked, though her tone suggested she knew exactly what he meant. "Is it true? About your father?" Maya looked at him steadily. "What do you think?" Before Ethan could answer, Mrs. Peterson called the class to attention. But the lesson was interrupted 15 minutes later by a knock on the classroom door. Principal Henderson entered, followed by a woman in an expensive suit who radiated the kind of authority that made everyone in the room instinctively straighten up. "Ms. Richardson," Henderson said, his voice carefully neutral. "This is Ms. Catherine Delacroix from the district office. She'd like to speak with you." Maya gathered her books calmly, ignoring the stares of her classmates. As she walked toward the door, she paused at Ethan's desk. "Page 247, she said quietly. "The molecular bonding diagrams. That's where we should start our research." It was such a perfectly normal student interaction that it somehow made everything else seem even more surreal. Maya followed Ms. Delacroix, who she now realized must be Rosa's niece, the one who worked in educational administration, down the hallway to Principal Henderson's office. Inside, she found a scene that would have been comical under different circumstances. Henderson sat behind his desk, looking like he was about to face a firing squad. Across from him sat a man Maya didn't recognize. Expensive suit, nervous demeanor, the look of someone who'd been called in to handle a situation well above his pay grade. And in the corner, looking perfectly at ease in a chair that seemed too small for his frame, sat her Uncle Marco. "Maya, sweetheart," Uncle Marco said, rising to give her a warm hug. "How was your first class?" "Fine," Maya said, accepting the embrace. "Mrs. Peterson is reviewing molecular bonding theory." "Excellent. Education is so important." Marco's tone was conversational, but Maya caught the subtle message: keep playing the role of the normal student. The nervous man in the expensive suit cleared his throat. "Ms. Richardson, I'm Richard Blackwood from the school district's legal department. We're here to discuss yesterday's incident." Maya settled into the remaining chair, her posture relaxed but alert. "What would you like to know?" "Well, there are concerns about the disruption to the educational environment," Blackwood began, consulting a legal pad covered in notes. "Reports of threats, intimidation." "I'm sorry," Maya interrupted politely, "but I think there might be some confusion. I didn't threaten anyone. I simply shared some factual information and made a phone call to my father." "The information you shared," Henderson said carefully, "about the other students' personal lives. How did you obtain that information?" Maya tilted her head slightly, considering the question. "Mr. Henderson, Lincoln High has over 2,000 students. We all attend classes together, eat lunch together, participate in activities together. Is it really surprising that we know things about each other?" "The level of detail," Blackwood began. "I'm observant," Maya said simply. "I pay attention. These boys have been bullying students for years and everyone knows it. The only difference is that yesterday someone finally had enough information to make them think twice about their behavior. Uncle Marco leaned forward slightly. "If I may," he said, his voice carrying the kind of quiet authority that made everyone in the room pay attention. "My niece is an honor student who has never been in trouble at this school. Yesterday, she was verbally assaulted, accused of criminal activity, and physically intimidated by 4 male students who are significantly larger than she is. Her response was to use words rather than violence. I would think the school would be proud of how she handled herself." The room fell silent. Blackwood shuffled through his papers, clearly looking for some legal framework that could contain a situation he didn't fully understand. "The concern," Ms. Delacroix said carefully, "is about the phone call. The implications of what was said." Maya's expression remained perfectly innocent. "I called my father to tell him that some boys at school were being mean to me. Is there a policy against calling your parents when you're upset?" "It's the context," Henderson began. "The context," Uncle Marco said, his voice taking on a slightly cooler tone, "is that 4 boys ganged up on a 17-year-old girl and tried to humiliate her in front of her peers. The context is that they accused her of being a drug dealer, without any evidence whatsoever. The context is that they destroyed her lunch and demanded she crawl on the floor to clean it up." He paused, letting the words sink in. "If you want to discuss context, perhaps we should talk about the school's failure to address the bullying that led to this situation in the first place." Blackwood's pen froze over his legal pad. "Are you suggesting the school is liable?" "I'm suggesting," Marco said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "that Maya handled a difficult situation with remarkable restraint. She could have responded very differently." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Maya watched the adults navigate around what couldn't be said directly, each of them understanding that they were dealing with forces beyond the usual scope of high school politics. "What we'd like," Henderson said finally, "is some assurance that there won't be any escalation, that this situation is resolved." Maya looked at him with genuine confusion. "Mr. Henderson, I just want to finish my senior year and graduate. I have college applications to complete, final exams to study for, and a chemistry project that's due next week. Why would I want any escalation?" It was such a perfectly reasonable response from such a perfectly normal-seeming student that Henderson almost believed they could actually contain this situation within the walls of Lincoln High School. Almost. His phone buzzed with a text message, then another, then a third. Around the room, everyone's phones began lighting up simultaneously. Everyone except Maya and Uncle Marco, who seemed completely unaware of whatever was happening in the digital world outside the principal's office. Henderson glanced at his phone and his face went white. The first message was from the district superintendent. The second was from the mayor's office. The third was from someone whose name he recognized from the business section of the Chicago Tribune. All of them contained variations of the same message. "Handle the Richardson situation with extreme care." "Is there a problem?" Maya asked, noticing Henderson's expression. "No," Henderson said quickly, sliding his phone into his desk drawer. "No problem at all. I think we're done here." Uncle Marco stood, smoothing down his suit jacket. "Excellent. Maya, you should get back to class. Education is important." Maya gathered her books and headed for the door, pausing to look back at the room full of adults who were all trying very hard to pretend they understood what had just happened. "Mr. Henderson," she said, "I hope those boys learned something from yesterday. I'd hate for anyone else to have to go through what I went through." The warning was delivered with such genuine concern that it took Henderson a moment to recognize it as such. By the time he did, Maya was already gone, walking back to her chemistry class as if she hadn't just reminded the entire Lincoln High administration exactly who they were dealing with. Outside in the hallway, Uncle Marco caught up with her. "How do you feel about all this, sweetheart?" Maya considered the question as they walked. "Relieved, I think. I spent 3 years trying to be invisible, trying to fit in, trying to be normal. But normal is exhausting when it's not who you really are." "And who are you really?" Marco asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Maya smiled, and for the first time in years, it was completely genuine. "I'm Antonio Richardson's daughter, and I'm done pretending to be anyone else." By lunchtime, the social ecosystem at Lincoln High had fundamentally shifted. Students who had never acknowledged Maya's existence now watched her with a mixture of fear and fascination. The popular table where Brandon and his crew usually held court sat half empty. Tyler still hadn't returned to school, and Marcus spent most of his time hiding in the library, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Maya sat at her usual table along the far wall, but today she wasn't alone. Ethan had joined her again, and this time he wasn't the only one. Sarah Chen, the valedictorian who rarely spoke to anyone outside of academic contexts, had approached their table with nervous determination. "Maya," Sarah said, clutching her lunch. "Trey, I wanted to apologize for yesterday, for not saying anything when those guys were bothering you." Maya looked up from her sandwich, studying Sarah's earnest expression. "You don't need to apologize. It wasn't your fight." "But it should have been," Sarah insisted. "We all just sat there and watched. That was wrong." Before Maya could respond, 3 more students approached their table. Jamie Morrison from the debate team, Alex Kim from the robotics club, and surprisingly, Destiny Williams, one of the few other black students in their grade level who Maya had always admired from. "A distance. Mind if we sit?" Destiny asked, her voice carrying the kind of confidence that Maya had always envied. Maya gestured to the empty chairs around the table. "Of course." As the group settled in, Maya couldn't help but notice the stares they were attracting from around. The cafeteria. This was unprecedented. The invisible girl suddenly at the center of a diverse group that included some of the school's brightest students. "So," Jamie said, unwrapping his sandwich with deliberate casualness, "yesterday was intense." "That's one word for it," Alex agreed, pushing his glasses up his nose nervously. Destiny leaned forward, her voice low but direct. "Maya, I've been at this school for 4 years, and I've watched those boys terrorize people the entire time. What you did yesterday, that was the first time anyone ever made them back down." "I didn't mean for it to become such a big thing," Maya said quietly. "But it needed to become a big thing," Sarah interjected. "Brandon Mitchell has been getting away with being a bully since middle school because everyone was too scared to stand up to him. His dad donates money to the athletics program. His grades get overlooked because he's the star quarterback. He thought he was untouchable." Ethan, who had been quietly listening to the conversation, finally spoke up. "Maya, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Yesterday, when you knew all those things about them, their addresses, their secrets, their family situations, how long have you been collecting that information?" Maya took a bite of her apple, considering how to answer. Around the table, everyone waited with obvious curiosity. 3 years, she said finally, "since freshman year." "Why?" Destiny asked. Maya was quiet for a long moment, her dark eyes distant as she remembered those early days at Lincoln High. "When I first got here, I was terrified. This school is so different from where I went to middle school. Everyone seemed to know each other already. They had money. They had connections. I felt like an outsider." She paused, organizing her thoughts. "So I started watching, listening, learning how things really worked here, who had power, who was vulnerable, what the real hierarchies were beneath all the surface stuff." "That's actually brilliant," Jamie said admiringly. You created your own intelligence network. It wasn't meant to be strategic, Maya said with a small smile. I was just trying to survive. But after a while, I realized that information really is power. The more I knew about how this place worked, the safer I felt. Alex leaned forward, his curiosity overcoming his nervousness. What else do you know? Before Maya could answer, the conversation was interrupted by a commotion near the cafeteria. Entrance! Brandon Mitchell had finally arrived for lunch, and his appearance sent a visible ripple through the room. He looked terrible. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his clothes wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes that suggested he'd slept even less than his friends. But it wasn't just his appearance that drew attention. Walking beside him was Coach Thompson, the head football coach and one of the most influential faculty members at Lincoln High. Behind them came Mr. Davidson, the athletic director, and bringing up the rear was someone Maya didn't recognize. A tall, thin man in an expensive suit who radiated the kind of nervous energy that suggested he was very much out of his element. The group made their way directly to Maya's table, and the entire cafeteria fell silent. Even the lunch staff stopped what they were doing to watch. Ms. Richardson, Coach Thompson said, his voice carefully respectful, could we speak with you for a moment? Maya glanced around the table at her new companions, then back at the group of adults. Of course, but my friends can stay. Coach Thompson hesitated, glancing at the man in the suit, who nodded nervously. Maya, the stranger said, extending his. And I'm Robert Mitchell, Brandon's father. Maya shook his hand politely, noting the slight tremor in his grip. Mr. Mitchell, I wanted to apologize, Robert Mitchell continued, his voice gaining strength as he spoke, for my son's behavior yesterday. What he said to you, how he acted, it was completely unacceptable. Around the table, Maya's new friends exchanged glances. This was not what anyone had expected. I appreciate the apology, Maya said carefully. Brandon stepped forward, and Maya could see the effort it was taking him to maintain his composure. Maya, I want to apologize too. I was wrong. What I said about you, what I accused you of, I had no right. His voice cracked slightly on the last words, and Maya realized that this wasn't just about yesterday's confrontation. Someone had explained to Brandon exactly who he had tried to humiliate, and the reality had shattered his worldview. I accept your apology, Maya said simply. Robert Mitchell's relief was palpable. Thank you. If there's anything we can do to make this right. Actually, Maya said, standing up from her chair, there is something. The adults tensed, clearly bracing for demands they might not be able to meet. Brandon, Maya said, looking directly at him, I want you to apologize to every person you've bullied at this school. Not just me, everyone. Brandon's face went white. Everyone? Everyone, Maya confirmed. Sarah, how many people would you estimate Brandon has bullied over the years? Sarah considered the question seriously. At least 30 students that I know personally, probably more. 30 people, Maya repeated, letting the number sink in. 30 students who had their lunch money taken, their books knocked out of their hands, their confidence destroyed because you thought it was fun. Brandon opened his mouth to protest, then closed it again. Around the cafeteria, students were nodding, some of them wiping away tears as they remembered their own encounters with his cruelty. That's fair, Robert Mitchell said quickly. Brandon will apologize to everyone he's wronged, publicly, Maya added, in front of the whole school at tomorrow's assembly. Coach Thompson shifted uncomfortably. Maya, that might be fair, Maya finished. That might be fair, which is all I'm asking for. She turned to look around the cafeteria, her voice carrying clearly in the silent room. But it's not just about apologies. It's about change, real change. Maya walked to the center of the cafeteria, and every eye in the room followed her. When she spoke, her voice was steady and confident. For 3 years, I watched this school operate on a system where some people got to be cruel and others just had to take it, where having money or athletic ability or the right connections meant you could hurt people without consequences. She paused, letting her words sink in. That system is broken, and it's going to change. From her table, Destiny stood up. Maya's right. We've all been complicit in letting this happen. One by one, other students began standing. Sarah Chen, Jamie Morrison, Alex Kim. Even some students Maya didn't know personally rose from their seats, showing their support. "What are you proposing?" asked Jessica Park, David's older sister, who had been watching the entire scene with obvious concern for her family's reputation. Maya smiled, and for the first time since arriving at Lincoln High, she felt truly powerful. Not because of her family connections, but because of her own strength and the support of people who believed in doing what was right. "I'm proposing that we create a new system," Maya said. "One where bullying has real consequences, where students look out for each other instead of looking the other way, where respect isn't something you have to earn through fear." She looked directly at Brandon, who was still standing with his father and the coaches. "Brandon, you asked what you could do to make this right. Help me change this school. Use your influence, your popularity, your position on the team to make Lincoln High a place where everyone feels safe." Brandon stared at her for a long moment, and Maya could see him processing everything that had happened, everything that had changed in less than 24 hours. "How?" he asked finally. Maya's smile widened. "We start with that apology assembly, but we don't stop there. We create a peer mediation program. We establish real consequences for bullying that go beyond detention or suspension. We make it clear that this behavior isn't just against school rules. It's against who we want to be as a community." Robert Mitchell stepped forward. "The Mitchell family will support this initiative financially, whatever resources you need, and the athletic department will participate fully," Coach Thompson added, though he looked like he was swallowing something bitter. "All of our teams will be part of the anti-bullying program." Maya nodded, accepting their support, but not letting it change her focus. This wasn't about money or official endorsements. This was about something more fundamental. "The most important thing," Maya said, addressing the entire cafeteria, "is that we all commit to being better, to speak up when we see someone being hurt, to choose kindness over cruelty even when it's harder." She paused, looking around at the faces staring back at her, some hopeful, some skeptical, some still processing the dramatic shift in their school's social dynamics. 3 days ago, I was the invisible girl in the back of the class. Today, I'm standing here talking to all of you about changing our school culture. If I can transform from invisible to influential in that short a time, imagine what we can accomplish together if we commit to real change. The silence that followed was different from the tense quiet that had marked the beginning of lunch. This was the silence of people thinking, processing, considering possibilities they had never imagined before. Then, slowly, applause began. It started with Destiny, spread to Sarah and Jamie and Alex, and gradually encompassed the entire cafeteria. Even some of the lunch staff were clapping, caught up in the moment of hope and possibility. Maya Richardson, who had spent 3 years trying to be invisible, stood at the center of it all and finally understood what it meant to use power responsibly. 3 months later, Lincoln High School bore little resemblance to the institution Maya had first entered as a frightened freshman. The changes hadn't happened overnight, but they had been swift and comprehensive, driven by a combination of student activism, administrative support, and the quiet but unmistakable influence of the Richardson family. The morning assembly that had begun with Brandon's public apology had become a weekly tradition. Students took turns sharing stories, discussing challenges, and celebrating successes in their ongoing effort to transform their school culture. What had started as a requirement imposed on a bully had evolved into something genuine, a community conversation about respect, dignity, and mutual support. Maya walked through the hallways now with confidence that felt natural rather than performed. Her transformation was complete but not dramatic. She still preferred listening to talking, still excelled academically, still chose her words carefully. But the hunched shoulders and downcast eyes were gone, replaced by the bearing of someone who knew exactly who she was and was comfortable with that knowledge. "Maya!" Destiny called out from across the hallway, weaving through the crowd of students with her characteristic energy. "Student council meeting in 5 minutes. You ready for the presentation?" Maya adjusted her backpack and smiled. "As ready as I'll ever be." The student council chamber was packed beyond capacity, with representatives from every grade level and school organization present. What had begun as Maya's anti-bullying initiative had grown into a comprehensive student leadership program that was attracting attention from educators across the state. Principal Henderson, who had survived the initial crisis and emerged as a genuine advocate for reform, called the meeting to order. Before we begin today's agenda, I want to acknowledge what we've accomplished together over the past 3 months. He gestured to a display board covered with statistics and testimonials. Reported bullying incidents are down 73%. Student satisfaction surveys show the highest scores in school history. College admission counselors have specifically commented on the leadership and character demonstrated by our graduating class. Applause filled the room, but Maya noticed. It was different from the tentative clapping that had followed her first cafeteria speech. This was the sound of genuine pride and accomplishment. "Today," Henderson continued, "Maya Richardson will present the final proposal for our peer mediation expansion program." Maya stood and walked to the front of the room, her presentation materials organized and her speaking points clear in her mind. But before she could begin, the door opened and Ethan Walsh entered, slightly out of breath and carrying a large envelope. "Sorry I'm late," he said, making his way to an empty chair. "But I have news that I can't wait." Maya raised an eyebrow. "What kind of news?" Ethan grinned and held up the envelope. "The National Education Foundation just announced this year's Student Leadership Excellence Awards. Care to guess which school program won the national championship?" The star. Room erupted in cheers and applause. Maya felt her cheeks flush with pride, but not for herself, for everyone who had worked to make the transformation possible. "That's not all," Ethan continued, his excitement infectious. "The foundation is sending a documentary crew next month to film our program for a national special on innovative approaches to school culture reform." Maya laughed, shaking her head in amazement. 3 months ago, most of you didn't even know I existed. Now we're going to be on national television. 3 months ago, Sarah Chen called out from the back of the room, this school was a completely different place. You didn't just become visible, Maya. You helped all of us see what we could become. As the excitement died down, Maya began her presentation. But instead of focusing on statistics and program details, she found herself talking about something more fundamental. "When I first came to Lincoln High," she said, "I thought the goal was survival. Keep your head down, don't make waves, get through 4 years without getting noticed by the wrong people. I spent 3 years perfecting the art of invisibility because I believed that was the only way to stay safe." She paused, looking around the room at faces that had become familiar. Over the past few months, faces that now looked back at her with respect and genuine affection. But invisibility isn't safety. It's just another kind of prison. When we hide who we really are, when we accept systems that allow some people to hurt others without consequences, we're not protecting ourselves. We're enabling the very things that make us feel unsafe in the first place. From the audience, Brandon Mitchell nodded slowly. His own transformation had been the most dramatic of anyone's, from the school's most feared bully to one of the most effective advocates for the new peer mediation program. The football team, under his leadership, had become active participants in conflict resolution rather than perpetrators of intimidation. The real lesson, Maya continued, isn't about standing up to bullies, though that's important. It's about recognizing that we all have power, power to choose kindness, power to speak up for others, power to create the kind of community we want to live in. She gestured to the packed room. Look around. This is what happens when people stop hiding and start working together. This is what's possible when we choose to see each other as allies rather than threats. After the meeting, Maya walked through the school parking lot toward the familiar black town car that now picked her up every day. But she wasn't alone. Ethan, Destiny, Sarah, and several other friends accompanied her, their conversation animated, with plans for the summer leadership camp they were organizing. Maya, Destiny said as they reached the car, I have to ask you something I've been wondering about for months. What's that? That first day, when you told Brandon and his crew all those personal details about their lives, you really had been watching them for 3 years. Maya smiled, remembering the girl who had collected information as a survival strategy. Every detail, every pattern, every weakness. That's honestly terrifying, Jamie Morrison said, though his tone was admiring rather than fearful. Knowledge is power, Maya agreed, but what matters is how you choose to use that power. Ethan stepped closer as the others said their goodbyes. Can I ask you something personal? Of course. Do you ever miss it? Being invisible? Maya considered the question as she watched her friends head toward their own cars, laughing and making plans with the easy confidence of people who felt safe and valued in their community. Sometimes, she said honestly, there was something peaceful about observing without being observed, but I realized that invisibility was just fear disguised as strategy, and I'm done being afraid. The car door opened and Vincent Marcelli emerged, his imposing presence softened by the warm smile he reserved for Maya. Over the past 3 months, he had become a regular fixture at school events, his attendance serving as a quiet reminder that the Richardson family's investment in Lincoln extended far beyond Maya's individual experience. How was the meeting, Principessa? He asked, using the affectionate nickname that had evolved from Antonio's habit of calling her Princess. We won a national award, Maya said, settling into the back seat, and we're going to be on television. Vincent chuckled as he started the engine. Your father is going to be very proud. He's been telling everyone about his daughter, the education reformer. As they drove through the familiar streets toward home, Maya reflected on the unexpected turns her senior year had taken. She had entered Lincoln High as Antonio Richardson's daughter, trying desperately to hide that connection. She was graduating as Maya Richardson, a leader, an advocate, and someone who had learned to use her family's power responsibly while building her own influence through character and conviction. The Richardson estate came into view, its elegant, lines and manicured grounds representing not just wealth and power, but the kind of stability that allowed people to think beyond mere survival. Maya had learned that privilege came with responsibility, the responsibility to use advantages not just for personal benefit, but to create opportunities for others. Antonio was waiting in the library when Maya arrived home, his expression radiating paternal pride as he looked up from the newspaper spread across his desk. I hear congratulations are in order, he said, rising to embrace his daughter. The whole school won the award, Maya said, accepting his hug. I was just part of the team. Antonio held her at arm's length, his dark eyes sparkling with amusement. Just part of the team? Maya, you transformed an entire institution in 3 months. You turned enemies into allies, created lasting change, and did it all while maintaining your grades and your principles. He paused, his expression becoming more serious. But most importantly, you learned something that many people in our world never understand, that real power isn't about making people fear you. It's about inspiring them to be better than they thought possible. Maya smiled, thinking about Brandon's evolution from bully to advocate, about the packed student council meetings, about the national recognition that had validated their efforts. I had good teachers, she said, and now you're teaching others. The cycle continues, but in a better direction. As Maya headed upstairs to begin her homework, she passed the wall of family photographs that chronicled the Richardson legacy. Generations of strong people who had built something lasting, who had understood that true success was measured, not just in personal achievement, but in positive impact on others. Soon, there would be new photographs on that wall, images from graduation, from the national award ceremony, from the documentary filming. Pictures that would tell the story of Maya Richardson, who had learned to be powerful without being cruel, influential without being feared, and strong without making others weak. She had started the year as the invisible girl in the back of the class. She was ending it as someone who would never be invisible again, not because she demanded attention, but because she had earned respect. And in the process, she had helped transform not just herself, but an entire community. The quiet girl had found her voice, and it turned out to be exactly what everyone needed to hear. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.